Let's give it a go now, for Niki giving up his time for Blackbird Ventures. So you've done Startup Grind before.
I've participated in Adelaide, so now I'm moving up the ladder.
That's it. Startup Grind Adelaide. They do good things though. And you hosted an event for us too. You interviewed the founder of Nitro.
Yes.
So I'd like to think you got a bit of a relationship there with Startup Grind. So thank you again. We always like to go back. I usually open with the question: is there a mother or father that was an entrepreneur?
No, both my parents were high school teachers, and then my mother is now a university lecturer, so nothing really entrepreneurial about the family at all. I would say the inklings of entrepreneurship were, I used to collect basketball cards when I was young and had a very competitive spirit in trading and collecting them. I used to, through my mum's work, got a dial-up access to the internet. I think it was like 1992.
Yep.
I used to go to ESPN and print out the box scores of NBA games and sell them to kids at school for like $5 a week. You could choose a team and I'd print out the box scores. And there was no NBA coverage back in 1992.
Yep.
So I guess that was it was all self-discovered. It wasn't a family thing at all.
I was a basketball card collector as well.
Yep.
Wasn't too entrepreneurial with it. So this is in your primary school days?
Yeah, they're probably end of primary school, start of high school, so maybe like 10, 11 years old, something.
And there was just something inside you that said you want to do your own thing, or you quite hadn't figured it out yet?
I think just fascinated by how things work. I think like just having a curiosity about why does the world work this way, or there's kind of a view that how do you work within a system, but then there are other people that think is that system the right system? Can the system be changed? And I think always had that curiosity to pull things apart, to rebuild them, like electronics and computers and that sort of stuff.
Was there a problem with authority?
Yeah, I used to always get into trouble. Hopefully I get into less trouble now. But I don't know. I guess not a problem with authority, just a problem with fixed thinking.
Yeah, no, that's right. I always see these common themes that kind of come out from time to time. Usually something that happened in childhood, or something that they had some sort of entrepreneurial spark, and then always a lot of times had a problem with authority.
Yep.
So fast forwarding, what was your education?
So after high school, I grew up in Newcastle and was choosing university, had a number of different options, and one of the options was this course at UNSW in Sydney that paid you to go to university. So I thought, I'll choose that one because I get $200 a week to attend university. It was a scholarship course. It was sort of it was an attractive sticker price, but the reality was that you did 18 months of work experience. So if you actually calculated the 10 grand a year that you got, it was like $5 an hour if you worked those 18 months elsewhere. So it wasn't the best thinking. But the course was sort of half commerce, half computer science. There were 40 people in it, and it just turned out to be really ultra entrepreneurial. So it was Mike Cannon-Brooks and I were roommates at university. Scott Farquhar, who was the other founder of Atlassian, was at the course. At least 5 other people have gone on to do entrepreneurial things.
All the guys that thought there was free money.
Yeah,
free money
hacking the
course.
system, but the system hacked them in that case. But it had nothing to do with entrepreneurship. There was no courses taught. There was no hint of go and create a company. It was all go and work for, I don't know, the help desk of Telstra, or go and work for the IT department of Macquarie Bank.
So many hours at university and so many hours with big corporates?
Yeah, and I think the entrepreneurial spirit came from, this was, again, like when I was starting out university, it was 1998, 1999. If people remember back then, there were these magazines, The Red Herring and Business 2.0, and they sort of grew to be kind of phone book sized, and just used to devour them every week, every month. And just found a group of people that were similarly interested in entrepreneurship, and it was, again, like even the best developers that I know self-taught themselves. They didn't get told to learn something. They just went and did it themselves. And I think the same thing with entrepreneurship. Hopefully, we can encourage more entrepreneurship with our education system now that we realize the benefits. But back then it was, if you wanted to learn about it, you had to teach yourself.
So you had this technical background, right? Were you coding before this?
Yeah, coding, but wasn't that good at it. So I know how to program, but I haven't programmed in quite a while. It was, I guess, that curiosity around how the things worked and understanding beneath the surface how did things get delivered was the prime motivation.
Do you, just as a practical kind of advice for entrepreneurs out there, advise them to take a crash course in coding and stuff just to have that context? I know that we'll get into Startmate, it has a strong technical focus, but is there some advice around for entrepreneurs there?
I think the other thing, with the learning, like how do you learn? I think you go and do something and then learn all the things you need to know to do that something. So don't just learn how to code because you want to code. Learn how to code because you have an idea about X and how X should work differently. And along the way, you'll learn how to code and be a mobile developer or be whatever developer. I think if you have that motivation at the end product of what you want to do, then you'll learn a lot more quickly. Yeah.
And for the business guy, do you recommend the business guy?
Yeah, well, the other thing that's underestimated is just how easy programming is. Like, 20 years ago, you had to know assembly language. You had to know the hexadecimal code of, how to program at such a low level. And now these higher level functional programming languages are getting easier and easier as time goes on. And I think, Stack Overflow, GitHub, Google, it's just so much easier to learn how to be a programmer that even if you're a business person, it's not an excuse not to know how to code because you can learn fairly quickly if you have enough motivation. So
it used to be, if I can give the analogy, you used to have to do line by line yourself. Now it's pretty much piecing things together, right?
Yeah, and
I haven't done code since I was
abstracted also to a higher level. And again, what you said around open source software wasn't around 20 years ago, where people have contributed, kind of best practices, or all of these infrastructure components of software are freely available to build upon. And really you are at that logic level. You're not having to reinvent the wheel and to do a lot of sort of plumbing. You just have the logic at the top. So it's actually pretty, it's never been easier to learn how to code now. Cool.
So you do this education where you've got with Mike Cannon-Brooks and the guys. What happened next? Did you go and get a corporate job when you were bored silly? What happened?
We dropped out in the first year. So
right.
We got to university. As I said, we're always talking about the internet, and we just thought, shit, like we're so unlucky to be born when we're born. Like the internet is taking off, and never again will there be a time like 1999 that all of the ideas on the internet will get done in the next 2 years, and we have to leave right now. So we didn't leave. So Mike Cannon-Brooks and I actually started a company. If you're going to start a company with Mike Cannon-Brooks, you don't want to start the one that I started with him.
Yeah.
You wanted to start Atlassian. It was, so we did university part-time, so we put that off in the background and did a company called the Bookmark Box, which was, if you can remember back then when people had work computers, they had home computers, library computers that you used at school and so on. And the problem we were solving was, much in the same way that Hotmail made email in the browser, we would make bookmarks in the browser and in the cloud, so that whenever you bookmark something, think Delicious, but a few years before Delicious, then you would have access to it on any computer. And then very quickly from there, we had like 80,000 users, which was like amazing. For the internet back then, no one really used the internet. And I think 8 million bookmarks. And we started to use, again, a problem back then was web spam. Google wasn't around. So search results were really spammy. If you search for anything, you'd get casino sites at the top. And we were starting to use the pages that people had bookmarked as a trust signal. So we could create our own search engine such that if you bookmarked this page, I would trust that page to whatever content it had, we could trust it, and it's on the domain, so we could trust the domain a little bit more since you trusted that page. And
not too dissimilar from early Google.
Yeah, the Bookmark Box, we got an office. It was just the two of us. We raised 30 grand from, like 10 grand from my uncle, 10 grand from his dad, and 10 grand from my uncle's friend. The business built up to that, started to turn the product into, as well as a bookmark management app, a sort of community-driven search engine. And then this was 1999, and then 3 companies, and funny you should say Elon Musk, because it was actually Elon Musk's brother did a bookmark company back in 1999. And there was these 3 companies that raised basically $25 million on a seed round, kind of just on a PowerPoint deck.
Crazy days, right?
To do, essentially the same idea. We were like, well, we got 30 grand, and
from my uncle.
We haven't even graduated university. So why don't we, sell ourselves to this company? And so we sent emails, to one of them actually replied and said, we loved your work. Come and talk to us. And, like Mike went to New York and, wore a suit and tie and tried to look professional as, 18-year-olds can look. And we ended up selling the company to this company, Blink.com, which had raised $25 million seed round to give, they were just about to launch. They would give their launch kind of a boost. The company didn't work out, but even...
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
Interestingly, the founders of Blink.com actually went on to build Google's ad servers and be really senior in DoubleClick. So even though those guys participated in the craziness, they ended up making a really, really big impact. Elon Musk's brother, Kimball Musk, I think sold the company, now runs a restaurant in Boulder and does investing and stuff like that. So it was like I felt like that was my education. That was the university of life. It was literally 12 months journey, but I'd never learnt so much at so quick a rate. So it was sort of the gateway drug to entrepreneurship. I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life, not, work.
Well, this was a brilliant like end for you guys, right? Exit at 18.
Yeah, don't dramatize the exit. Certainly got money, but it just felt wow, like what a great year that was. And so that led to the decision that that's what I wanted to do with my life. It wasn't working at Macquarie Bank or working at a large company.
So what was the next one? Was the next one the real estate? And
no,
why
then
not with Mike?
So then basically we through the company that had acquired the Bookmark Box in New York, we'd met a few other people, and one of the folks we'd met is a guy called Alan Meckler, who ran these trade shows and events in the 80s and 90s, and he had just he ended up buying a company called Jupiter Research, which was a research and advisory company that used to do forecasting and surveying and data on the sort of internet
Politics?
economy. No, it was it's sort of like it was research and events that were sold to companies like AOL and Google and Yahoo and all of the big ads companies and so on used to subscribe to the research and use it for their planning and consumer behavior research and so on and so forth. So we actually started the Australian operations of Jupiter, and that's when that was probably a year-ish, and then Mike left to found Atlassian. I moved to New York because I really wanted to live in New York, and they were headquartered in New York, and then moved over with Jupiter, worked with them for another year, and then started my second startup, which was Homethinking. Homethinking is a real estate site that measures agent sales activity, so to know which agent sells the most homes in a neighborhood, so that you as a homeowner in that neighborhood could then search, here's my neighborhood, and it'll pull up a kind of quantified resume of this person has sold X number of homes for Y price, and this is how long it took them. That was the idea behind it.
I think we've got rate my agent here tonight. Where's that guy? There you go. It's ripping you off.
No,
No.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
No, he's good.
it's an idea that I don't think I gave great service to. And one of the big lessons, it went okay, it didn't go, it went well, but not super well. And one of the lessons I think I learned out of that experience was I just didn't love the customer. I had no empathy. I just didn't like to speak to real estate agents. I didn't empathize with their problems.
Opportunist?
It wasn't authentic. And even the problem with that, is you've got to spend your life doing what you love, I think, and then that's will give you a chance to be the best version of yourself. And I think with that business, it didn't prevent it from achieving some level of success, but it didn't. It taught me that whatever I do, I should have deep empathy for the customer. And so after that, sort of very 4-hour work week version of the business, so try to automate everything. My now wife and I, we lived in France and Italy and Greece for a year, just sort of traveling around. Then moved back to Australia about 7 years ago, get married, have kids. We now have 2 young daughters. So it was that realization that, this wasn't going to be my life's work. So, let's not invest any more time or money in it. Let's, take some of the cash flow, begin investing. I was passionate about investing, both from a venture capital sense, but I think, learning from the stories of people like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and some hedge fund managers like David Einhorn of Greenlight Capital, all of these great thinkers about the world. I was always identified with that kind of person. And moved back to Australia, the full intention was actually to do another company, but to do it for people that I did care about. And this was 2009, 2010. And the idea for the company was it was Optimizely, but you also had a human element where people would help you come up with ideas for A/B testing, because A/B testing, everyone it's like you get to the buffet and you try to eat it at once. Here's 100 different ideas I want to A/B test, and then they run out of ideas and there's no more A/B tests. There's just this blank space. And how can you help people succeed with A/B testing by, again, doing it at a more measured pace and helping them with the ideas to test, so that you're always testing something. You're not, binge testing.
Can I sidetrack it for a little bit? How many people know Atlassian? All right, let's talk about that one then. Was just out of curiosity, did Mike say come work with me on this thing?
I think it wasn't explicitly like that. He was like, here's what I'm doing. I wasn't, and this was back in 2002, so I wasn't super passionate about developer tools. I still am not super passionate about developer tools. I was always very close to the company, from the very early days, saw all of the things that worked. Guess could have jumped in, but it still didn't feel like that was my calling. I don't know. I think back then I was naive in that I really wanted to do something, on my own, which I think is a very overrated thing that prevents people from becoming successful, having to have that ego attached to something, or having to be the front person. I've realized actually prevents people from succeeding. So I think, for a variety of reasons, developer tools, I wanted to do my own thing. It didn't. So,
and also just another question was, you said that you went traveling, you kind of jumped from, so you had an exit with the real estate thing too. Was that?
No, there was no exit. It just kept running. But basically, if you think of it as, used to have 8 or 9 people, and then I thought, okay, how can I just automate everything? And, was a very early user of Odesk. They used to use me in their PR campaigns when Odesk was a little tiny startup, to say, hey, here's what people are doing in startups, and just try to really just automate everything about it, so that there was no human time, and 4 hours I could run the business a week, and and I would take some time just to travel around and think about what I'd do next.
So I get that now. Sorry, I thought you sold that business. So. Start doing a little bit of investing. You come back to Australia. What's next?
So started investing again.
So you didn't do that, and you didn't do that
no,
project.
Came back to Australia. Was doing that project and thought, okay. Also, this was very novel back then, but there was all of these like professional business people that were doing startups, and they had like years of experience, and but they were non-technical. And then there were all these groups of nerds that couldn't describe what they were doing, but were doing cool stuff and had no business experience and probably thought they couldn't run a company, even though they could run a company. And I thought, I really want to invest in those sort of people, and if they're doing things that want to be the best in the world, not just the best in Australia. So traditionally, Australian entrepreneurship has been about, what idea works in the US, let's make it work in Australia. So I didn't want to do any of that. What I did want to do is, as well as Atlassian, there's Envato, there's Campaign Monitor, there's Half Brick Studios, there's Retail Me Not, all of these great companies that were started in Australia but were the best in the world in what they did, all run by deeply unqualified people. The fascinating thing to me is if you look at all of the world's largest companies, if you look at all of the world's greatest CEOs now, at the beginning of the journey, all of them looked deeply unqualified. They looked terrible from a resume standpoint, and so, barely finished university. Google and Atlassian, Campaign Monitor didn't even finish university. Microsoft, Facebook. So all of these people that were thought to be deeply unqualified turned out to be the best leaders in the world and created the biggest company. So that was always deeply fascinating. So I thought, well, I just want to find those underappreciated people. And this was, I think, YC had done 1 or 2 batches, but he was not widely known. Started angel investing again. I didn't have that much money. I was like $25K a company, and maybe I could do 2 and 3 if the wife approved. And started doing that, and then realized, okay, well, how about I make a bigger impact, and how about I learn more quickly as an investor as well? So instead of, could I invest in lots of companies? You can't really go to someone and say, I'd like to invest 3K in your company or 5K in your company to be worthwhile for them to talk to you. But if I pooled a group of people and made a bigger impact, I could invest in more companies and I could help them more because you had this network of founders. And that was all part of when I just got back. I'd had coffee with people I knew before I'd moved to New York, so that was a 5-year. I'd been away for 5 years. Started to catch up with coffee for people that I knew. Said, "This is what I'm interested in. Would you chip in a little bit of money?" And
we had Alan from Blue Chili talk about this as well.
Yeah.
Really
and it felt like everyone was thinking about this, but no one had done anything, and they were just ready to be activated. It wasn't even it was no pitch. They were like, "Yes, I'm in." Like, I've been thinking about this. Yes, we should definitely do this. And can you talk to this other person because they definitely will want to be involved as well. And that was Startmate.
Was that the first accelerator in Australia at the time?
I think so. I don't know, so don't quote me on that one. But it was, again, trying to be very specifically about could we help technical people can we help nerds become great CEOs? That's the mission of Startmate. And we had no idea who would apply, no idea if we could help them, if they'd turn out to be anything. And that was 6 years ago. So we did that, and then like this funny thing happened, going back to do you deeply empathize with your customer? Doing Startmate, it felt, I made friends in high school, I made friends in university, but you don't really make friends after that. And it felt like with Startmate for the first time, I made great friends. Like it was just such a magical experience that, of spending time with people that I deeply respected, that I thought were so great, and still friends with today, even from that first batch. And I thought, well, this is what I should be doing. This is what I want to do. The other thing is that everyone wants to start a startup. No one wants to become an investor. Like sometimes rich people who get bored, they be an investor, but no one sort of says, I really want to, this is my career. This is, I want to be the best investor in the world. So it felt like the supply and demand imbalance was out of whack, and becoming the best investor was an easier task than becoming the best founder at that point in time, and I think even more so now. Also in the past, Australia, the entrepreneurs that had succeeded didn't really re-engage. So with the next generation, so in Silicon Valley, there's this magic that happens when someone builds a technology company and succeeds. They invest and they help the next generation of companies, and I really wanted to see that happen in Australia. So that was the important catalyst behind Startmate and both Startmate and Blackbird. So Startmate did for 2 years, and besides the 3 or 4 months back then, when the program was active, I was spending 2 days a week while it was active. I was spending 0 days a week when it wasn't active. So it was just a part-time thing. It was a way to angel invest. But the company started to do well. Some of the companies started to do well, and I thought, wait a minute, this should be what I do in life. This is a chance for me to make a really, really big impact, and let's do this full time. And that's what led to the founding of Blackbird.
So going into Startmate, before we get on the Blackbird journey, what was your thinking going in? Yeah, you had an idea of what YC was doing in the US, but you had no blueprint. So what was your thinking about how you're going to get these companies accelerated?
I think the two things were, I'd spent some time in the US, I was living in New York, but I traveled frequently to San Francisco. So I knew lots of people, who were founders, lots of people in the ecosystem. And then and I'd obviously had the benefit of knowing the Atlassian story. And, when I got back, I met some more people and I was like, wow, these guys are actually pretty comparable. Like Australians underestimate how good they are compared to, the best people in Silicon Valley when they're starting out. Like it's when they're starting out, not when they're successful, the comparison. So I thought, wow, these are, really awesome people. And again, felt like people had deeply underestimated developers becoming great CEOs or technical product people learning how to be a CEO eventually and creating these great companies. So I felt like just that, met so many great people in Australia that I felt just an instinct that there were these people out there and just give it a try. Just don't talk about it, just go and do it.
And was that trying to team them up with as many CEOs as possible to get them that business acumen?
It was really just, founders helping other founders. And so, what does that mean? I think it's just the people who have created a company just have this deep empathy for how messy it is. I think that's the mistake of corporate people is are very skilled in optimization. So, a whole course on MBA, an MBA is a whole course on how to optimize something that works. Versus, and this, right about when we started Startmate was also this lean startup movement where the process of going from 0 to 1 is one of discovery. It's not one of optimization. So the process of discovery is a more humbling one. It's more likely that you'll be wrong. It's more likely that you don't know everything. It's more like you test your hypothesis and see what happens and be open to that because, so many people just assume that they know everything and just plow through. Whereas I think large businesses are very great at having people who optimize something that know something works. How can you get it to work 100 times over? And so, the kind of fantasy of these things of let's create a business plan or let's create a 5-year forecast that is accurate to 4 decimal places. All of that just doesn't matter. I think only founders really have the empathy and the true appreciation of how messy it is in the beginning, and that's where I got the most help in my own journey from other founders. And I thought, let's only make it about founders helping other founders. Everyone else, great if they want to help, but I would even just tune out all of that and just focus on building a product, talking to customers, and the feedback loop between, and get founders to help you navigate that iteration. It's still, novel. There's lots of different opinions as to how people get help. That's my opinion.
What are some of the successes that came out of Startmate so far?
Yeah, well, success is a very nebulous term.
Sure.
So the other thing is, both at Startmate and at Blackbird, Blackbird is slightly different in the traditional structure of venture capital firms are these 10-year partnerships. So you say, give me some money, I'll invest it in the first 2 or 3 years in all the companies that we'll invest in. We'll save some money for later in case some of them need it. They need it if they fail. They're not doing well, they need it if they are doing well. And after 10 years, we'll wrap it up and sell the stakes, give back everyone. But even with Startmate, I told all the investors we never want to sell. So, could we invest in something and hold it for 20, 30, 40 years? Like that would be a dream scenario. In Blackbird, we tell our investors that, we're not looking for founders with an exit strategy. We want them to be doing their life's work because, if you have that, that's, counterintuitively how you make the most money, in my view, is these mission-driven founders that build companies over decades. Apple and Google are now the world's largest companies, not largest technology companies, the largest companies in the world that generate the most cash, that are the best businesses in the world. And so why would you sell the best business in the world to buy the second best or the third best or the 20th best?
And that's not typical in the VC world, right?
Not in Australia, definitely in the US though. There are, famously Sequoia, which is the best investor or the investor with the best track record in history. So when a company goes IPO, you give all the shares to all the people in the venture capital fund. They can do whatever they want. Venture capital funds make money by, you get a percentage of the profits. So whatever profit the investment has generated, you get usually 20%, but the Silicon Valley funds, the better ones, get 30%. So you get this profit share, you get paid in shares as well. And those partners never sell their shares. So, they're still holders of Google from their, 1998 investment in Google today. And it's, I think the best people in the world are long-term thinkers and the worst people in the world are short-term thinkers. So, who are the best long-term thinkers in investment sense? Venture capital, or the best venture capitalists. There's plenty of bad venture capitalists. And also, people like Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway and all of those investors that invest for a very long period of time. I think if you invest for a long period of time, it forces you to really make great decisions versus, I can probably get my money out tomorrow. I bet that, stocks will go up because Brexit and blah, blah, and sell after a day. You'll probably make bad decisions because you just, you can reverse it.
So tell me the story about how Blackbird came to be, and was it off the back of Startmate and seeing that more investment was needed? Or?
Yeah, a bunch of the companies had started to do well, so the progress. They'd been able to raise money from US investors as well as Australian investors. You could just see the starts of these interesting journeys, and the aim of Blackbird was. The same thing, so mainly technical product founders with this global ambition, and to be a very long-term partner to them. And the vision for Blackbird and the ambition really is, could we invest hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars into a single company? So it's not to be an early-stage VC; it's to be a part owner of the best companies that we produce as a country. And we're not there yet. We have raised a bunch of funds, and we can probably invest in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds. But we'd love to invest in every round. We'd love to. The other thing that doesn't make sense to me is that you can invest in a company, you can sit on the board, you can understand a company for 6 or 7 years and be deeply involved in it, and then when the company goes public, you're unqualified to know about it. So as soon as it goes public, suddenly you don't know about it. That's the job of a public market investor. That's the job of a small cap fund manager. And then he or she gets to know it, and the company keeps growing, and then all of a sudden it's not his or her job anymore. It's the job of the large cap fund manager. So it feels like that investing world is very top down kind of thinking, rather than okay, who knows, who is in the best position to know the prospects of that company? So, the aim really, or the vision and the hope that we have a lot of trust to earn and a lot of results to deliver, but, could we, be an owner of these great companies and invest at every single point in their life?
What do you take with this argument about going to the US to raise money, or trying to raise money in Australia, and how we're kind of solving that problem?
I think we've certainly seen it that for the best companies, the financing market is global, not local. So if you're doing something, again, trying to be the best in the world, and you're doing it well, investors anywhere in the world will want to invest in you. So I think what's very interesting about technology companies now is because of open source software, because of AWS, it doesn't require millions of dollars just to get started. So when it did require $3 million just to get a product out in the market, like a simple website out in the market, you actually needed to move to Silicon Valley, because if you needed permission to start, if you needed $3 to $5 million, the people who gave you the $3 to $5 million are in Silicon Valley. So you needed to move there. You needed to ask permission to start. And then I think with open source software and AWS, you don't need permission to start. You can just be wherever you are. So entrepreneurship has it's almost like this bomb that has fragmented entrepreneurship all around the world. And so the best companies in the world are more likely to be started outside of Silicon Valley than not. There's the debate now whether once they do start to show signs of promise, should they move to Silicon Valley? But the best investors in Silicon Valley know that it's more likely that the companies are getting started outside of Silicon Valley. So they're more than happy to look outside of Silicon Valley now. Still not the majority, but getting there. And then once you've found product market fit, no matter where you are, everyone in the world will be chasing you. Canva's round last year where they raised $15 million US. 5, 6 of the best VCs in the world flew to Sydney to beg them, we'd love to be an investor in Canva. So I think, and even, from their seed round, they had investors from the US and Australia. In Startmate, about half the money comes from US investors, half the money comes from Australian investors in that round after Startmate. So I think, for the best companies, the financing market is global. I think that's a great thing. I think, for me as a venture capitalist, I need to, play in the NBA, not the NBL, but for the companies, they have a deeper market of capital to build their business. They can get help from the best investors in the world, wherever they are. So I think it's like a really, really positive trend.
Is Australian venture capital developing more and more relationships with China, for example? It seems like US is the holy grail. We've got all, Facebook, everything's over there. But just given the number of people in China and everything that's happening there, are we starting to develop meaningful relationships there?
I think yes, but I think actually you'll find that in the very near future, the majority of venture capital will be Chinese. So not just for Australian companies, for the world. I think if you look at the most active investors writing the biggest checks, it's SoftBank, Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, so on and so forth. And so those guys are investors in US funds. They write huge later stage checks. I think people underestimated how profitable, how wonderful of businesses they've built, such that I expect the majority of venture capital will actually be sourced from China. It might be managed in Silicon Valley, but it's sourced in China.
And more interest at home here in Australia too, like Blackbird Fund number 3, maybe, is it what we're up to? Maybe,
yep. We'll see. I think our journey has been there's this founder community who have put their own personal money into Blackbird, and that was our first fund of $30 million. And then last year we raised a series of funds that were $200 million, which were those same group of founders doubling their commitment, but then 2 superannuation funds, First State Super and Host Plus investing. So I think we've only got locally sourced money, but there's US LPs that are becoming more interested, and I think inevitably Chinese internet companies like those will become more interested as well.
Then no one's gone with Slido, probably my fault. I want to take a few questions, so whoever couldn't get through, let's go now. Let's do it. Go on. Oh, can you keep asking questions? Yep.
What's your interest in virtual reality?
Interest in virtual reality?
I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Like the right way to look at it, like virtual reality is solution versus what's the problem. Like, can people reimagine a problem in a very interesting way through virtual reality? I'm sure they can, but it has to be about the problem, not just is virtual reality cool or not. So, like, the best example I think is like, at the moment, people are like, we're an AI company, and that's, fine. But what problem are you going to solve with AI? And I think, the interesting problem for me with AI, or the number one interesting problem for me with AI, is like driverless cars. Like, driverless cars help people get around a city. They could completely change car ownership so that no one needs to own a car and they can just subscribe to a car when they need it. They can, reduce congestion. They can, people did a flyover map of LA where every parking lane, so if you think about a road, usually you have the two traveling lanes and the outer lanes of the parking lanes. If you added up the parking lanes, if you added up everyone's driveway and garage, if you added up all the parking garages, that was 40% of LA's real estate could be freed up to do something else. So I feel like, that's a worthy problem to be solved. Like, driverless car companies don't call themselves AI, but essentially that's what driverless cars are. Beyond building an electric vehicle is you have to perceive the world around you, classify it, weigh up the probabilities that the child will run on the road or the truck driver will push in on you, and then make a decision. That's all AI in action. So I feel like when you lead with the solution, you're saying something about the problem. Like, you're saying that the problem is not a worthy problem. So again, like, the biggest mistake of a pitch would be saying you have a solution without really describing and selling the problem first.
Yep, in front of you.
With some of the changes that we see in the VC market in the US, like recently slowing down and not being as aggressive as they were, is that going to have any impact in the Australian market, or is the Australian market going to follow? What is your take on that specifically when it comes to the Australian?
You want to just repeat that question for the
Yep.
camera?
So the US market slowing down, does that have ramifications for the Australian market? I think, so do you mean the Australian venture capital market, or do you mean if you're a startup in Australia, does that have an effect on you?
Well, I guess it's very true. It first comes to the VC and then affects the startup. So with it, the first question would be, does it affect the VC market?
So the VC market, was zero. So you can't go less than zero. So it's like you can't have the downturn beneath the surface level of the earth. So I feel like in the last couple of years, there are these green shoots of venture capital that are appearing. So you're starting to see some credible people who are good investors start to create venture capital firms that hopefully will succeed. So SquarePeg and Airtree and Blackbird and so on and so forth. So you're starting to see that appear. I don't think it's in such a nascent stage that I don't think there'll be wild swings either way. It feels like the only way is up. So it's not to say that things are awesome, but it's just near impossible to go beneath what we did have a few years ago, which was this very scorched earth scenario. I think for Australian startups, as I said, like, you're part of a global market. You're not part of a local market for financing. And so, every company that is doing well is affected by that financing market in the US, particularly, at that later stages. So I feel like it feels like the seed market is still very healthy. Series A are still getting done, but they'll sit on their hands for another couple months versus maybe a couple weeks last year where they'd sign and do it. Series B, we've seen some really, at least from our viewpoint, seen some really, generous activity happen. Where it's that really late stage market where it's very close to the IPO, that's where, it got too overheated, too optimistic, and that's, disappeared. People are like, I don't get it. Like, it feels public markets are just way too pessimistic. Yes, the private markets are too optimistic, but like, it's still unbelievable that Apple, even, the world's largest company, Apple is valued, I think, at $500 billion, has $250 billion of cash. So you remove the cash, it's $250 billion of equity value and $50 billion a year net profit, like five times profit on a world that, is happy with negative interest rates. They're happy to be certain that they'll lose money. As long as they're certain, that's all they care about. So they can lose money by investing in German bonds, but they're just extremely happy because they're certain to lose only 1% or whatever they're losing at the moment. So it just doesn't match that Apple and Google and then all the companies that did IPO that are great businesses like Etsy and New Relic and so on and so forth are pretty just cynically valued. I think actually everyone in the room has a great chance to be an investor in these companies. If you look at the companies, actually, people say, oh, you have to get in early to Google, but even Google, you just as someone who can log into their international share trading account, and if you bought Google 12 years ago, you'd be the best investor in the world. Like, you have access to all of that. So I feel like public market's too pessimistic, so the private market guys probably got too happy, and now they're going, I don't get it, and so we'll sit it out for a while. All the early stages still seems to be functioning, but you can see it's starting to stretch out. Not so much the prices coming down, but the transaction length getting longer and maybe the transaction volume going down of venture capital funding.
What is, I've got a lot of startups and entrepreneurs in the audience. What is Blackbird looking for when someone comes to pitch?
Yeah, it's hard because to describe exactly, traditionally we have, again, so the big thing is global from day one. So what does that mean? It means, first of all, definitely not here's a US idea, make it work here. But it also doesn't mean we're going to prove it out in Australia and then we're going to go to another country and then we're going to go to another country. So can your product or service be globally frictionless? Can customers all around the world who have the problem just sign up and use the product? That's the main filter. And then also great ambition. Like, I have a theory of what I've learnt in the last 6 or 7 years as an investor is the more ambition you have, the more chance you have of succeeding. So it might sound counterintuitive, but a lot of people say, well, if I just do this idea that's less ambitious, it's more likely to happen because I'm not being too greedy. I just want this little thing and I just want to get rich, and it'll happen for 2 years and then I'll sell it, and that's all I want to do in life. And I think the problem with that is that that pitch to someone to come to work for you, that's pretty underwhelming. You get a small exit in 2 years, and why would I want to work for you? Investors again rely on people having big swings at ambition. So then you're not going to raise money from the best people at the best prices. Or the people that help you as advisors, mentors, and other we want to be the blah of Australia. That's pretty underwhelming. I don't want to spend any time with you. So the opposite of that is, we're seeing this most closely, I would say, it just creates a network effect when you have a really big mission like Canva, just reshaped the face of graphic design. And it's not a competitor to Photoshop. What it really is unlocking everyone that needs to do design and enabling them to be designers. So it's saying that people who create great design shouldn't have to go to university, shouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars on Photoshop to know how to create great design. And that mission and that the long product roadmap in their minds, they don't want to sell, they want to create something really substantial. Well, all the best people want to work for Canva, all the best people want to invest in Canva, all the best people want to help Canva, all the companies want to partner with Canva. And so there's, I think, a counterintuitive thing where the more ambitious you are, the more chance you have of success. So what do we look for is just limitless ambition. We just want people who really want to make a big, dent in the world, I think, to quote Steve Jobs.
Nice. Gary?
So, from companies that come pitching to you, what sector are they from? And from your perspective for Australia, what advantage do we have in which industry, I guess, for venture capital point of view?
We're open to anything. The thing is, as an investor, you can fall in love with the attributes of a business, but and you can have kind of hints and opinions on different markets, but you always have to be open to who walks through the door. Like the best example I would say is we started Blackbird 4 years ago. We said we'd seen all these wonderful SaaS companies like Atlassian and Campaign Monitor where no salespeople, customers all around the world, loved the product, used the product free for 30 days, became a paid subscriber, and had built this great global companies. And we said, and often people say that's great. If you want to sell to small business, you don't need salespeople. But if you want to sell to really large companies, then you really do need salespeople. And Campaign Monitor and Atlassian said, no, that absolutely isn't the case. You can sell to the world's largest companies without salespeople too. So we said we want to be an investor in companies that sell all around the world from day one, that are enterprise software companies that don't have salespeople. And we've made investments in Canva and Culture Amp and Autopilot and Safety Culture, and the list goes on. And so that's what we told our investors we'd do. That's what we did. We were fortunate enough to be part of those. So that was like, saying what we did. And then, the most intriguing company, if you will, of the first fund was a Melbourne CEO, founder of a company called Zoox. So Zoox, if you read the public record, they're very stealthy, are creating a direct competitor to Uber, but the cars don't have drivers in them, the cars don't look like cars. There's no mention of driverless cars in our first fundraising pitch. We had not thought about driverless cars until we met Tim. But as soon as we did, it just made all the sense in the world. Like the quality of what are the worst parts of Uber? The worst parts of Uber are it raises shitloads of money so that it can spend lots of money on driver incentives, not only to join the platform, but to get them to turn up to wherever the demand, they literally pay people and run competitions. And who can get to in Sydney, all the demand is at Bondi Beach for people getting into the city in the morning, but all the drivers live in Western Sydney, so they have these competitions and incentives that if you turn on your phone before a certain hour and you turn up to Bondi Beach, you get another double bonus, and if you do that 3 days in a row, you get a triple bonus. And so it's all of these financial incentives to the drivers. Then you have all the people employed by Uber that are in operations. All they do is think about how do I get the drivers to turn up to the right part of the city or the right part of the suburbs at the right time. Driverless cars, you just tell them where to go. They don't put up a fight. They don't have to respond to incentives. They work 24 hours a day. They don't complain. So you don't need just have an algorithm to tell them where to go. You don't even need people to think about that and how humans respond. So it really cuts to the heart of the network effect of Uber. Drivers get more riders, get more drivers. We'll remove the drivers, and there goes the network effect. Remove the need for driver incentives. That puts you on a level playing field, even though the Uber's raised billions of dollars. So all parts of the market and the business, and then what could a car be if you didn't have to have the steering wheel and the rear view mirror and all these other things. So I think that's an example where we had no idea about the category and just fell in love immediately with Tim and the vision he had. And so you're always open to the unknown.
Will you look at really early companies?
Yeah, we do. It does say a lot about the person. Can they get the product out in the hands of a few customers, and do those customers really love it? That is, I think, if you can't do that without capital in this world of, AWS will give you thousands of dollars of credits. Open source software, teach yourself how to code. To me, there's no excuse. Could you get a software product out and prove that, or even just prove manually? How can you do something manually and prove it out? That's always better. I think, always with those sorts of questions, though, we do invest early. We've invested in pre-product, we've invested mostly post-product, but it still feels like like you're filling out a loan at the startup funding bank. You're asking the question because you just want to know the minimum requirements. Whereas I think the right way to think about it is just what really is important is this, this great ambition, this, really unique insight into how the world could work a little bit differently. That's the key, not like, what are the minimum requirements. So.
No, I was thinking more of a threshold in terms of dollars or something like that. But
We, usually we'll invest in seed rounds that are, $750K to $1 million. We'll invest in Series A rounds that are $2 to $5 million. We'll invest later stage rounds that are more than that. I think it all depends on exactly what you're doing. I think if it's software related, you should have something out and interesting, or you should have some unique story as to how you arrived at the problem. Like Canva was pre-product when we invested, but the team had built a company called Fusion Books, which was high school yearbooks before Canva, and basically discovered that all of these schools were using it for all these other things like newsletters and and all these things that weren't school yearbooks, and they were crying out for a tool to help them create great, beautiful looking things, but not have to send it off to the designer and wait for it to come back, to not have to buy Photoshop. And that insight led them to wait a minute, let's do this for a more broad-based population. Let's create Canva. And so even though it was pre-product, you could see the journey of, say, Mel when she was teaching university students, to when they created Fusion Books, to when they were creating Canva. I think that the Andreessen and Horowitz guys call it the idea maze. Like, how did that person arrive at that particular problem? If that is like a really rich history, if that's like a very interesting story, that's we are much more likely to invest as well.
cool. That was a question. Yep.
I was just going to ask you about the ecosystem and depth of investments for your fund. And do you struggle to find enough investments? Or do you find quality investments?
Can you?
Yeah. Do we
Repeat it again.
struggle to find great quality investments, and is the depth of the ecosystem enough? It actually, there's two answers. So absolutely, we could invest in so much more. The second answer is we actually only invest in 8 companies to 10 companies per year. So the question to be answered for us is, can we find 8 to 10 great teams per year? And if you think about it like that, the problem becomes a lot more solvable, or it's like not a big problem to be solved. And even within that, you look at, again, the distribution of returns, like what companies succeed and what impact does that have on the fund return. And there's usually 1 or 2 companies that account for, the vast majority of the returns. And so then, from an absolute requirement basis, can we meet one company that is awesome every 2 years? And yes, we can.
Behind you. Yeah. What's the
Southeast Asian market, how much interest do we have in terms of... we tend to have no interest in any region. So what we mean by that is, this idea from Global from day one is that you don't have a Southeast Asian strategy, you don't have a US strategy, you don't have any country strategy or region strategy. You have a problem that you think can be solved in a particular way, and customers all around the world, sign up and use the product. So whether they're in Madagascar or Singapore, it doesn't really matter. You're creating a product that people have a painful problem to be solved for. The other thing is, despite Australia, having such a obviously geographic and then I think even cultural now affinity with Southeast Asia, we so rarely see, I think because we are global from day one, but you'd be surprised how many companies we do see that don't even take the time to think about that. And very rarely people are targeting Southeast Asia. So I don't know if it's just, again, as a VC, you don't really get to determine the problems to be solved. You rely on the entrepreneurs who walk through the door to say what problems they will solve. But I would say, it's very ultra rare that we would see anyone focused on Southeast Asia.
Take one more question. My buddy in the back with film. Yep, you. Yeah.
What are some of the basic marketing strategies you've used before in the past to promote some of your startups in order to develop?
Great question.
So how have the startups grown themselves, or how have we promoted them more.
How you promote it? So you've got an idea, solve a great problem, you know it,
Mm.
what it's all about, so what you've done, some stuff that's worked on in the past.
Some of the best marketing strategies from his portfolio companies.
Yeah.
I think, boiled down to it, it's so unsatisfying, but and it's such a arrogantly trite answer. But if you create something truly exceptional, it really is magical to watch how it just grows organically. How all of the best companies that we are investors in, don't really talk about growth hacking. Like, it's not like a trick. It's not like a 3-cup kind of thing that if you do it, like, you'll grow and someone else won't. I think at the heart of it is how painful is the problem to be solved. And so people really underestimate, we think we can invest in great people, but we don't know market timing. We don't know how great markets are until you try it out. And it's so humbling to think, the successful companies that, do really well, the founders are just held up as these great heroes. But, from our vantage point, you have this sample of people who look very equally talented, and the only thing that is different, like, they all are intelligent, they all try the latest marketing strategies and ideas, and, very metrics driven, and all of these things that, you would say are high quality about them. But, one person is a failure because, the company didn't work out, and you'll never hear from it again, and, you won't think that that's founder's any good compared to the company that really succeeds. And I don't know, it really does come down to just how painful the problem is. Like, that's what I've learned in life, and it's not satisfying to tell people, but, the YC, motto is make something people want. And you'd just be so surprised that if it is something they want, wow, does it grow.
All right, I want to end it there. I want everyone back on their feet, and a big thank you to Niki for giving up his time. Let's do it. Thanks.